The space station called Varanthos hung like a silver jewel against the endless black of space. And inside its massive walls stood the most famous military academy in the entire galaxy. A place where the children of warriors came to become legends, where 1,000 different species learned to fight and lead and conquer. Lena Vasquez walked through the main corridor with her bag over her shoulder and her eyes fixed straight ahead. And she could feel the stares burning into her back from every direction. The whispers that followed her like shadows in the artificial light. She was small, smaller than almost everyone here, standing only 5 feet and 6 inches tall in a place where most beings towered 7 or 8 or even 9 feet above the polished floor. And her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid that regulation demanded. And her uniform fit her lean frame like it was made for someone else entirely. Is that a human? Someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. Look how tiny she is. Another voice answered with amusement dripping from every word. Lena kept walking and did not turn her head and did not react at all, because she had learned long ago that reactions were what they wanted. That showing pain or anger only invited more of the same. She was one of only 3 humans ever admitted to the Galactic Union Military Academy, and every single day she was reminded of that fact in ways both subtle and cruel. In the way instructors looked past her during lectures, in the way other cadets moved away when she sat down to eat, in the way her name was always spoken with a question mark hanging at the end. The Academy had accepted her because they had to, because the treaty said they must allow any species to apply. But accepting her and welcoming her were 2 very different things. Humans were a young race, barely a century into space travel, while other species had sailed between stars for thousands of years. And the galaxy looked at humanity the way a grown adult might look at a toddler, trying to join a conversation about war and politics and power. They came from Earth, a planet that most species considered a death world, a place of crushing gravity and poison air and endless predators, hunting each other through jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands. And yet somehow the galaxy had decided that the creatures who survived such a place must be weak, must be fragile, must be primitive things that only succeeded through luck and nothing more. Elena found her quarters, a small room with a single bed and a desk and a window that looked out at distant stars. And she set her bag down and stood there for a long moment just breathing. She had worked so hard to get here, had trained until her muscles screamed and studied until her eyes burned and fought through every test they could throw at her. And now she was finally inside these walls that had seemed so impossible to reach, but being inside was not the same as belonging. The door chimed, and she opened it to find a tall insectoid creature standing there with compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds and mandibles that clicked softly as it spoke. Cadet Vasquez, the creature said in a voice like rustling leaves. I am Instructor Chirek of the Veth species, and I have been assigned to oversee your integration into the Academy. And I wanted to welcome you personally and see if you have any questions or concerns. Elena studied the instructor for a moment before answering. Thank you, Instructor. I appreciate the welcome. I'm sure I will adapt quickly enough. Chirek tilted his head in a gesture that might have been curiosity or might have been doubt. The Academy can be challenging for those who are, shall we say, different from the majority. And if you experience any difficulties, I hope you will come to me. I understand, Elena said. And her voice was calm and even and gave nothing away after the instructor left. She sat on her bed and stared at the wall and thought about all the things she had not said, about the years of preparation that had brought her here, about the scars that marked her body beneath the uniform, about the nightmares that still woke her, some nights with the taste of blood in her mouth and the sound of screaming in her ears. She had survived worse than whispers and stares she would survive. This too, the next morning she entered the mess hall for breakfast and felt every conversation. Pause and restart at a lower volume as she passed. And she took her tray to an empty table in the corner and sat down alone and began to eat that. It was when she first saw him. He was massive, even by the standards of this place. 8 feet of armored skin and muscle, 4 powerful arms folded across a chest as wide as a cargo container. Eyes like burning coals set deep in a face that seemed carved from stone and raw de Corvath Zeln of the Theric species. Senior cadet, descendant of admirals and generals and conquerors. And he was looking at her with an expression that made something cold settle in her stomach. She met his gaze because looking away would be weakness. Held it for 1 heartbeat, and then 2, and then 3, before returning her attention to her food. She did not see the way his eyes narrowed or the way his upper lip curled back from teeth like broken glass. But she felt it somehow, felt the weight of his hatred pressing against her like a physical thing. New meat, someone at his table said with a laugh. And human meat at that, barely worth noticing. No, Corvath said in a voice like grinding stone. She is worth noticing. Look at her eyes. She thinks she belongs here. She thinks she is equal to us. His companions laughed, but Corvath did not laugh. Corvath just kept staring at the small human female who had dared to meet his gaze without flinching. And something that might have been rage or might have been something darker began to burn in his chest. Elena finished her meal and stood and carried her tray to the recycler and walked out of the mess hall. Without looking back, she had a class to attend, and she would not be late, and she would not give anyone a reason to say she did not belong behind her. Corvath watched her go and made a decision that would change everything. The harassment started small, so small that Elena could almost pretend it was not happening at all. Her equipment would go missing from her locker. Her training weapons would be damaged before drills. Her assignments would disappear from the academy system, and she would have to submit them again and again. It grew. She would turn a corner and find Corvath's followers waiting there, 4 or 5 of them blocking the hallway with their massive bodies and their cruel smiles. And they would say things to her in low voices that made her skin crawl. Words about dirt and vermin and prey animals that wandered into places they did not belong. Go back to your death world. Human, they would hiss at her. Go back to your mud and your poison air and your primitive little planet before someone teaches you a lesson you will not survive. Elena would walk past them without a word, would keep her eyes forward and her shoulders straight and her face empty of any emotion. And sometimes they would let her go, and sometimes they would shove her into the wall hard enough to leave bruises. She reported nothing. Instructor Chirek found her one day in the medical bay getting her ribs wrapped after a training accident that was not an accident at all. And his compound eyes studied her with something that might have been concern. Cadet Vasquez, he said carefully, I have heard rumors of certain difficulties you may be experiencing, and I want you to know that the Academy has policies against such behavior. And if you tell me what is happening, I can help. Elena looked at him and smiled a smile that did not reach her eyes. Nothing I cannot handle, sir. I appreciate your concern, but there is nothing to report. The instructor was silent for a long moment, before clicking his mandibles in what might have been frustration or might have been sadness. Humans are a proud species, I have read, and perhaps too proud for their own good sometimes. But pride will not heal broken bones. Cadet, no, Elena agreed, but it will keep me standing while they heal. Other cadets saw what was happening, saw the way Corvath and his pack hunted the human girl through the corridors and classrooms of the academy, but none of them stepped forward to help, because Corvath's family was powerful, and Elena was just a human after all, just a small soft thing from a primitive world who probably should not have been admitted in the first place. But some of them watched her more closely than others, and some of them began to notice things that made them uneasy in the physical training facility late at night when most cadets were sleeping. Elena would run on the machines for hours without stopping, would lift weights that should have been too heavy for her small frame, would push her body past limits that made watching aliens feel sick just looking at her. Her eyes during those sessions were different somehow, focused and cold and empty of everything except a terrible determination that seemed to burn from somewhere. Deep inside her psychological evaluation file sat on Instructor Chiric's desk one evening, and he read through it with growing unease, noting the sections that had been marked classified and the brief notes that remained visible. Subject demonstrates unusual stress tolerance. One note said, recommend monitoring. Said another, background includes extended survival situation in hostile environment. Said a third, and the word extended had been underlined twice. Chirik closed the file and sat in the darkness of his office and wondered what exactly the Academy had admitted into its halls. Corvath was growing frustrated because the human would not break. He had broken others before. Cadets who thought they were strong until he showed them what strength really meant. And they had all cracked eventually, had all come to him begging for mercy, or had simply given up and left the Academy in shame. But Elena just kept going, kept walking past his followers like they were furniture, kept excelling in her classes like the bruises. And the threats and the constant fear meant nothing at all. It was driving him mad. She looks at me like I'm nothing, he growled to his companions one night, his four fists clenched so tight that his armored knuckles creaked. Like I am some insect beneath her boot, and I cannot stand it any longer. Then challenge her, one of them suggested. Invoke the old right, demand a match in the arena, and show everyone what happens to vermin who forget their place. Corvath smiled a smile full of broken glass teeth. Yes, that is exactly what I will do. The next day at midday meal, he walked to her table where she sat alone as always, and he slammed his four fists down on the surface, hard enough to crack it, and every conversation in the massive hall went silent. Instantly, Elena looked up at him with those strange calm eyes and waited. Human. Corvath said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, you have insulted me and my family and my species with your presence here, and I demand satisfaction under the ancient laws of the Academy. I challenge you to single combat in the arena. Tomorrow at sunset. The silence that followed was so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She could refuse. She knew the rules allowed it, but refusing would mark her as a coward and would end any chance she had of earning respect or advancing in her career. Elena set down her eating utensil very slowly and looked up at the massive warrior looming over her, and when she spoke, her voice was soft, but somehow it carried to every corner of the room. Tomorrow at sunset. She said, I accept. Something flickered in Corvath's eyes, something that might have been triumph or might have been something else entirely, because her voice had not sounded like the voice of prey agreeing to be slaughtered. It had sounded like something far more dangerous. He turned and walked away, and the whispers began immediately. Voices from a dozen species, discussing odds and outcomes and how quickly the small human female would fall. Elena returned to her meal and finished eating and showed nothing on her face at all. But inside, in the deep dark place where she kept the memories of blood and fire and the screaming of things dying in the night, something was beginning to wake up. Word spread through the Academy like fire through dry grass, and by morning, everyone knew about the challenge etheric warrior against a human female. It was considered a joke by most, a brief and amusing spectacle that would end with the primitive creature broken on the arena floor and the natural order of things confirmed once again. Betting pools opened across the station, and the odds settled at 200-1 in Corvath's favor. And even that seemed generous to most observers who had seen the massive warrior train and fight and destroy opponents twice his size. Elena spent the day before the match in unusual calm. She ate a full breakfast, while others would have been too nervous to swallow a single bite. She attended her morning classes and took notes like nothing special was happening. She stretched her muscles, in the training facility with slow, careful movements that showed no trace of fear. Instructor Chirrut found her there in the early afternoon and his compound. Eyes showed worry that he could not hide. "Cadet Vasquez," he said quietly, "I have spoken with the medical staff, and they are prepared to provide documentation that you are unfit for combat due to your recent injuries. You could withdraw from the match without losing honor." Elena continued her stretching without looking at him. "I appreciate your concern, Instructor, but I will not be withdrawing. He will kill you," Chirrut said bluntly. "Maybe not on purpose, maybe the referee will stop it before he goes too far. But the Therak are warriors bred for violence across 1,000 generations, and you are human," Elena finished for him. And something in her voice made the instructor go still. "Yes, I know what I am." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were calm and deep and held something he could not name. "Some lessons can only be taught one way, Instructor, and some things can only be understood through pain. Mine or his, we will see which it is tonight. The arena was ancient, built when the academy was first founded centuries ago. A circular pit of sand and stone surrounded by rising tiers of seats that could hold thousands of spectators tonight. Those seats were full. Cadets and instructors and staff from across the station had come to watch, drawn by curiosity or bloodlust, or simply the desire to see something unusual. And the noise of their conversations filled the air like the buzzing of a grate. Hive Senior Instructor Draleth stood in the center of the arena waiting for the combatants. His stone-skinned body massive and ancient and marked with the scars of 100 battles. And his voice boomed out across the crowd as he announced the rules. No weapons. No killing strikes. The match ends when one fighter submits or is rendered unable to continue. These are the laws, and they will be obeyed. Corvath entered first to a wave of cheers and stamping feet. His forearms spread wide to accept the admiration of the crowd. His teeth bared in a predator's grin. His armored skin gleaming under the bright lights, he looked like a god of war come down from legend to walk among mortals. Then Elena entered, and the arena went quiet. She was so small compared to everything around her. A single fragile figure walking across the sand with steady steps. And she had removed her uniform jacket to reveal a simple training shirt beneath. The crowd saw her arms then, lean with muscle that moved like cables under her skin. And they saw the scars that marked her body. Lines and circles and jagged tears that told stories of violence and survival in a language that needed no translation. These were not the marks of training accidents or careful sparring matches. These were the marks of a creature that had fought for its life. And one Elena took her position across from Corvath and looked up at him without expression. And the warrior who had seemed so confident a moment ago felt something strange twist in his gut. Something that might have been doubt. No. He told himself, she is nothing. She is prey. She is a small, soft thing from a primitive world, and I will crush her like an insect. Begin. Draleth commanded Corv, charged with all the power of his warrior heritage, all four arms raised to strike. Expecting to end this farce in a single crushing blow that would show the galaxy what happened to those who challenged their betters. Elena she did not retreat or block or try to match his strength with her own. She simply was not there when his fists came down, sliding aside with a grace that seemed almost lazy. And as he stumbled past her, she struck. Her hand was a blur, jabbing into the nerve cluster beneath his second arm with surgical precision. And Corvath gasped and staggered as pain like lightning shot through his body. The crowd went silent. He spun and swung again. A massive backhand that would have taken her head off if it had connected. But she ducked beneath it, and her leg snapped out in a kick that cracked against his knee joint with a fondriz sound like breaking wood. Corvath stumbled and caught himself and stared at the small human female who had just heard him twice in 3 seconds. "What are you?" he breathed. Elena did not answer. She just moved again, circling him like something patient and hungry. And the aliens in the crowd began to feel something they had not expected to feel tonight. They began to feel afraid, not for the human. Not anymore for Corveth Bez. She was not fighting like prey trying to escape a predator. She was not fighting like a small creature hoping to survive against something larger and stronger. She was fighting like a predator herself. Something that had seen weakness and was moving in for the kill. Something ancient and terrible and patient that had learned to hunt in a world where everything was trying to kill it. She was fighting like a human. Corvath roared and attacked again with all the fury of his bloodline. And the real fight began. Corvath abandoned all technique and all control and became a storm of fury. Given flesh his four arms swung in wild arcs that would have shattered steel if they connected. His armored body charged and spun and struck with the desperate rage of a creature that had never known defeat. And the sand of the arena floor exploded in clouds beneath his thundering feet. Elena could not dodge everything. A blow caught her ribs and she felt them crack, pain exploding through her chest like fire. And she rolled with the impact, but another fist found her face and split her lip and sent her spinning to the ground with blood flying from her mouth. The crowd roared with relief, because this was what they had expected. This was how the story was supposed to go. The small primitive creature, broken by the superior warrior, Elena stood up. Blood ran down her chin and dripped onto the sand, and her breathing was harsh and ragged, but she stood up and faced him again, and something in her eyes had changed. The calm was gone now, replaced by something cold and focused and utterly without mercy. Something that looked out at the world through human eyes, but came from a place far older and far darker than civilization. What the galaxy did not understand about humans was that they were not prey. Yes, they were small, and yes, they were soft, and yes, they lacked claws and fangs and armor and venom and all the other weapons that evolution gave to predators across a million worlds. But humans had something else. Humans were persistence hunters, creatures that had evolved to chase their prey across endless distances, to run and walk and crawl until their targets collapsed from exhaustion, to keep going long after any reasonable being would have stopped. And when humans were cornered, when there was nowhere to run and nothing to do but fight, something happened inside them. The fear went away, the pain went away, everything went away except the ancient screaming need to survive at any cost. Elena felt the adrenaline flooding her body like a drug, felt her heart pounding strong and steady, felt her muscles coil with strength that should have been impossible for a frame so small. She felt the monster wake up. Corveth charged again, and this time Elena did not dodge. She stepped into his attack and caught his leading arm with both hands and twisted with her whole body behind the motion, and the crack of breaking bone echoed through the silent arena like a gunshot. Corveth screamed, a sound of shock and agony that did not seem possible from such a massive creature. And he stumbled back, cradling his ruined arm against his chest. Elena followed. She was relentless now, unstoppable, a small figure moving with terrible purpose as she dissected the warrior in front of her with strikes that targeted every weakness his armored body possessed: throat, nerve clusters, joints, eyes, the soft places between plates of natural armor. She knew them all somehow, had studied them or sensed them or simply understood them with the instinct of a creature born to hunt. Corveth swung with his remaining good arms, but she was inside his reach now, too close for his size to matter. And every blow he threw left him open to another precise strike that sent fresh waves of pain crashing through his failing body. The crowd had gone completely silent. Instructors and cadets and staff from a dozen species watched in frozen horror as the tiny human female systematically destroyed one of their finest warriors. And many of them felt something cold settling in their chests An instinctive fear that defied all logic. This was not supposed to happen. Humans were prey, humans were soft humans. When nothing, Corvath fell to his knees, his eyes glazed with pain, his forearms hanging useless at his sides. And Elena was on him instantly, her forearm across his throat, and her knee on his chest, and her face inches from his own. Her teeth were bared in something that was not a smile. "Yield," she whispered in a voice that only he could hear. And it was not a request. Instructor Dralith finally moved, finally broke free of the shock that had frozen him in place. And he shouted for the match to stop and rushed toward the fighters with his arms raised. He was too late by the time he reached them. Corvath had already slumped unconscious to the sand, his body broken in a dozen places. His warrior pride shattered beyond any hope of repair. Elena stood slowly and turned to face the crowd. She was covered in blood, most of it hers, and her ribs screamed with every breath, and her face was swelling, and her hands were torn and bruised from the force of her own strikes. But she stood. She stood and looked up at the thousands of aliens staring down her, and none of them could meet her eyes. None of them could hold her gaze for more than a heartbeat before looking away. In that moment they saw what humans really were, not prey, not weak, not primitive, something else. Entirely something that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on a world that killed everything it touched. Something that had hunted monsters and survived ice ages and crossed oceans and conquered every challenge a hostile universe could throw at it. Something that should never have been underestimated. Elena walked toward the arena exit, and the crowd parted before her without a sound. Cadets and instructors alike stepping back from her path like she was a force of nature that could not be stopped. She did not look back at Corvath's broken body. She did not look back at all behind her. The silence held until she was gone, and then whispers began, spreading through the crowd like ripples in water. Questions and fears and the slow, terrible realization that everything they thought they knew about humanity might have been wrong. Instructor Tirek stood in his seat with his mandibles hanging open and his compound eyes fixed on the empty space where Elena had stood. "What are they?" someone beside him asked in a shaking voice. Tirek did not answer because he did not know, but he was starting to understand why humans had survived their death world, and it had nothing to do with luck. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft hum of healing machines and the distant beeping of monitors tracking vital signs. Elena lay on a bed while alien doctors moved around her with careful hands, wrapping her ribs and treating her wounds and studying her with expressions that mixed professional concern with something like awe. 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, severe bruising across most of her body, a split lip, a minor concussion, and enough blood loss to kill most species her size. She would be fine in a week. The doctors could not understand it, could not process how a creature so badly damaged could be healing so fast, could be lying there with steady vital signs and clear eyes while her body knit itself back together at a rate that seemed almost impossible. Humans, they were learning, were remarkably difficult to kill. In another wing of the medical facility, Corvath Zelm lay in a very different condition. His right arm had been shattered so completely that even advanced alien medicine could not fully repair it. Nerve damage ran through half his body. His natural armor had cracked in multiple places, and the psychological evaluation suggested trauma that might never fully heal. His career as a combat officer was over. He would live, but he would never be the same, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw the human girl standing over him with blood on her teeth and death in her eyes. The Academy leadership convened an emergency meeting the next morning in a grand chamber filled with beings who had never imagined they would be discussing what had happened. "She must be expelled," insisted Admiral Zeln, Corvath's father, his 4 hands clenched into fists and his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. She used excessive force. She ignored the referee's commands. She nearly killed my son. Your son was the aggressor, Instructor Chirrut replied calmly. He initiated the challenge. He attacked first. And the records show that Cadet Vasquez did nothing that violated the rules of engagement. She is a savage. The Admiral spat. A primitive beast that does not belong among civilized peoples. She is a human, said a new voice. And everyone turned to see Commandant Varric entering the chamber. The Commandant was ancient. A Velith whose silver scales had faded to white with age, whose eyes held the weight of centuries of service. And when he spoke, even admirals listened. He moved to the central display and activated a recording. The footage from the arena match playing in perfect detail for everyone to see. Watch, he said quietly. They watched Elena fight. Watched her take hits that should have broken her. Watched her stand back up again and again. Watched her eyes change in that terrible moment when the monster woke. We made an error, the Commandant said when the recording ended. We looked at humans and saw something small and soft and primitive. We assumed that their harsh world must have made them weak, because only weak things need such struggle to survive. We forgot the other possibility. He turned to face the assembled officers, and his ancient eyes were troubled. We forgot that on their world, everything is trying to kill everything else. And yet humans rose to the top. They did not do this by being weak. They did not do this by being prey. They did it by being the most stubborn, most adaptable, most terrifyingly persistent predators their planet had ever produced. The chamber was silent. Cadet Vasquez broke no rules. Varric continued. She defended herself within the boundaries of the challenge. And the fact that we are disturbed by how effectively she did so is our failing. Not hers. Admiral Zeln opened his mouth to protest, but the Commandant's gaze silenced him. Your son bullied and harassed a fellow cadet for weeks. He publicly challenged her to combat, expecting an easy victory that would humiliate her and demonstrate his superiority. He was wrong. The matter is closed. Elena returned to classes 3 days later. The hallways that had once felt hostile now felt different. Cadets who had ignored her or whispered insults behind her back now stepped aside when she walked past. Instructors who had looked through her now met her eyes with something that might have been respect or might have been awareness. No one bothered her anymore, not because of new rules or official protection, but because they had seen what she was capable of. They had watched her break one of their finest warriors with her bare hands. And none of them wanted to find out if she could do it again. She ate alone still. But now it was by choice rather than exclusion. And sometimes she noticed other cadets looking at her with something other than contempt. Something that looked almost like curiosity or admiration. Weeks past, Elena continued her studies and her training and her quiet climb through the academy ranks. And slowly the memory of the arena began to fade from daily conversation, even as it remained burned into the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Then one evening in the library, a shadow fell across her study table, and she looked up to see a small figure standing there nervously. It was a Kreth female, one of the youngest cadets in the academy, a species known for their sonar navigation and their gentle dispositions. And Elena recognized her as another target of bullies, another creature that the strong had decided was acceptable to torment. May I sit? The young Kreth asked in a voice barely above a whisper. Elena gestured to the empty chair across from hers. Kreth sat and was silent for a long moment, her large dark eyes fixed on the table, before finally finding the courage to speak. How did you do it? She asked. How were you not afraid? I watched the recording and you never seemed scared at all. And I want to know how, because I am scared all the time, and I do not know how to make it stop. Elena considered the question carefully. She thought about Earth and the jungles where she had grown up, thought about the colony that had been destroyed, and the years she had spent alone in the wilderness, fighting to survive. thought about all the things that had tried to kill her and all the times she had refused to die. I was afraid, she finally said. I was terrified. Every moment of that fight I was certain I was going to die. The Kreth looked confused. But you fought anyway. Yes, why? Elena leaned back in her chair and looked at the young alien with eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. Humans are always afraid, she said. We come from a world where everything wants to kill us, where fear is the first thing we learn and the last thing we forget. But somewhere along the way we figured something out. She paused, remembering her father's voice speaking these same words to her when she was young, and the colony was still standing, and the universe had not yet shown her its teeth. Fear does not mean stop, Elena said. Fear means fight harder. It means there is something worth protecting, something worth surviving for. And as long as you are afraid, it means you are still alive and still in the fight. The Kreth was quiet for a long time. Then she opened her bag and pulled out her study materials and began to work, sitting there across from the human girl who had taught her. Something that no instructor ever had. They studied in silence together until the lights dimmed. For the night cycle, somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Union, a report was being filed. A quiet document that would change how humanity was perceived across 1,000 world species reclassification request. The header read current designation for human species, Sol 3, non-threat. Primitive, Category 7, recommended new designation. Apex Predator. Strategic Asset. Category 2 reasoning. Direct observation confirms previous assessments fundamentally flawed. Humans demonstrate extreme resilience, persistence, and combat capability that exceeds initial projections by significant margin. Recommend immediate revision of all strategic and diplomatic protocols regarding human contact. The official who signed the report paused before submitting it, thinking about the footage he had watched, thinking about the small, soft creature that had destroyed a warrior twice her size. He added one final note at the bottom. Further observation strongly advised. Suggest extreme caution when engaging humans in any competitive or hostile context. They are not what they appear to be. He submitted the report and turned off his terminal and sat in the darkness, wondering what it meant for the galaxy that humanity was finally waking up in somewhere on Varanthos Station, in a small room with a window looking out at distant stars. Elena Vasquez slept peacefully for the first time in years. She dreamed of Earth and its green jungles and its blue skies. She dreamed of home.